Truck Talk, brought to you by eTruckBiz.
Welcome back, everyone, to our latest episode of Truck Talk. I'm your host, Ben Wheel, and joining me again this episode are Tracy Taylor and Jeff Walzak. They were our guests last time on our last episode, talking about what to expect in 2021. And today we're drilling down into one of those topics, which is right-sizing your business. Some people call it spinning off part of their business, but it's going to be a big topic in 2021, so we wanted to address this more fully in this episode. Welcome, Tracy. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
Thanks. Well, so for today's episode, we're going to talk about some different things. We're going to first start talking about, let's understand why this is happening and what's driving this initiative. So, Jeff, let me start with you, because you talk to a lot of contractors around the United States. What is your insight into what's behind all this? Why are people having to right-size their businesses? These contractors are spinning off part of their business.
Well, at one time, there was the thought that you could run a mega operation and do it very well, and just probably the very best operators would rise to the top and be able to run big, huge operations. Well, what is actually happening is these big operations, folks are finding that they're very, very difficult to run, and they've grown way faster than anybody thought they would. So in order to try to get some of these operations under control or make them easier to manage and operate, they want to make them smaller, so that they're much easier to run.
Well, I understand that there are difficulties with the big operations. They may be in multiple locations, or what if these people, what have you seen about some of the growth they've experienced? Do you think that's some of the e-commerce that's behind this? And what are you seeing from contractors who you're talking to about how much volume happened in 2020 compared to previous years?
Well, that's the thing. So the volume in a lot of cases has doubled, if not more than that. So, it's one thing to grow at a steady rate, try to keep things under control and have your systems and processes working just fine. But, when you double your volume just like that, that becomes, that lends itself to a lot of different problems. So the first would be when you grow that fast and all of a sudden you've got twice as many people to deal with, first thing that happens is you have leadership problems. Only the very strongest leaders are able to do that. And then leadership problems will lead to other people problems. So you have the issue of turnover. Where am I going to get the people to double in size from? How many people are out there today that are willing to work for what you can pay them to work for you for, when you're competing not only with other transportation companies, that kind of thing, but you're competing with drawing unemployment and getting a government handout every 3 months. It becomes very difficult to find the folks to work for you. And like I said, it taxes your systems and processes. So what might have worked when you had 15 drivers maybe doesn't work when you have 40.
Makes sense. So, Tracy, you're out in the field. What are you seeing in Kansas? You're in more than one terminal. What are you seeing with the difficulties that Jeff mentioned you're seeing? Are you seeing the people problems other contractors are experiencing, maybe some challenges some of your operations have with the processes and systems?
Yeah, being out here in the field, a lot of the same stuff that Jeff talked about is the same thing that I see. We started out as a small four drivers, 6 trucks back in 2012, and today we have just under 56 P&D delivery drivers, and that's just in 2 different locations. So we've grown super big, super fast, and the first thing that I see is, these guys who are contracting, their business explodes in growth. They don't pick the right people. That's the big leadership problem. Just because a guy can deliver 200 stops a day does not automatically mean that this guy can manage people. The people that you need to manage and lead your operation may not be that great at delivery people. That's because they're great managers, right? And that is, this is one of the topics I've been real passionate about the last couple of years, is to get to that big, like Jeff was talking about, the super contractor that, that you're a regional service provider and that kind of stuff. You have to have not only the systems and processes in place, but the structure, the leadership structure, the management structure, business structure. And I think what everyone has kind of found out is that, one, it takes a lot of time to cultivate that. That's not just something that you can walk out on the street, hire 25 people, and now you're the best trucking company in the state. You have to grow some of those people. You got to find good leaders, and they may just be temporary, to get you from A to B, to get your business from this point to the next point. But it takes a lot of time to build up that middle management. And I think that's one of the things that FedEx has kind of realized, is that they don't have enough time with this explosive growth that we've seen in the last year. There's not enough time out there to allow these entities to develop into that size of a business with all those systems and processes in place. Recently, I was just at a BDS forum, and they really didn't roll anything out this year as far as like changes wise. They gave us the old attaboys for doing good during peak and whined around a little bit about how they had to spend $75 million on contingency. One of the things that they talk about in their big spiel this year was, the leadership aspect. And I've been thinking this way for the last couple of years, that's the key to being successful and being able to manage that. And as much as I think I'm really good, I also see the opportunity now with getting the right size, as FedEx calls it, because it just opens up the door for your business to kind of almost reset. It's a chance to take what you've learned over the last year, couple years, however long you've been around, and start fresh. You sell off that growth. If you think about it, most of us probably grew at least 50% since last year, and they're talking another 20%. It's not bad when you only have 10 guys. That's adding maybe 5-6 guys. But when you have 50 guys and you go 70%, that's another 30 people to manage. And
so they're predicting another 20% for 2021 in your BDS meeting.
Yeah, that's they said 10 conservatively, but they kind of hinted at 20 is kind of what they're targeting, because they have a lot of shippers that they cut back during peak, and then new ones that they're bringing on. They're really aggressive in trying to grow, which is a good thing for us, but you have to make sure that you manage that growth.
In case someone is listening and they aren't in this business yet, tell people what a BDS meeting is, just in general terms.
That's the business development people. They used to be contractor relations. They're the mouthpiece of the company, basically.
Okay, and you have these meetings at the beginning of every calendar year, basically, and then periodically.
Pretty much.
Okay, so they talked about so that this was a topic of conversations. Am I right at this meeting?
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay.
That was a big topic.
Tell our audience a little bit about the benefits as a contractor out there to right sizing, because you're, if I'm correct, you're looking at right sizing your own business.
Yeah, we've got a couple spin-offs that are carving out of each one of our P&D operations. And, for me, I've always wanted to continue to grow, because I wanted to be that large regional provider, almost creating a mini FedEx within a FedEx. But now with the new end of agreement language, that is not the current direction that a guy should probably head. For us, it is an opportunity to take this tremendous growth of the last 3 years and use that to basically, the way I'm approaching it, it's a reset for my business. I can take all the experience and all the mistakes that we've made in the last 3 years and get a start over fresh with roughly the same number of stops that we had in 2018, reapply that knowledge. Everybody, it's easy to be the Tuesday morning quarterback. This is an opportunity for us to be a Tuesday morning quarterback, but go ahead and win the Super Bowl this time instead of wishing and wanting.
That's a good analogy, considering the playoffs were yesterday. So you mentioned before that some of the benefits. So if some people are thinking, well, I don't want to have to, there really is a silver lining into this, or a few silver linings, I guess we'd say. They'll be easier to manage, like you mentioned. You consider a reset, and it's reducing some of your exposure out there, correct?
Yeah, and it also provides a vehicle if somebody wants to expand. Really, it gives you the cash. One of the big things BDS was touting this time was guys just trade with one contractor in this building and switching, 500 stops your 500 stops and your building for 500 stops in his building, and so on and so forth. So I mean, there's a way to expand if you pay attention.
That does make sense. So you were encouraging that. So it's in different terminals. So Jeff, back to you on a more national level. Can you talk to the listeners a little bit about some of the rules behind this? Because Tracy was talking about swapping, and in case people didn't understand, can you talk a little bit about what the folks in Pittsburgh are saying about what are some of the rules around this right sizing or spinoffs?
So the new optimum number, if you want to call it that, is somewhere around 2,500 stops. They don't want apparently at that size, it's an easy enough operation to run. They want you to, like I said, just have no more than 2,500 stops, average 2,500 stops a day. They also are careful about what percentage that you control or you operate, you service in the entire terminal service area, so that the terminal doesn't have the risk if you have 20, 30 or more percent of a building and something happens to you, that they want to reduce the risk at the terminal level so that they don't have all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. So it depends on the terminal, depends on the area, depends on a lot of things, but it looks like that's somewhere between 6 and 10% of the terminal's total volume.
That's what you're hearing from guys across the country, that's what it's seeming like. Because my understanding is you're working with some other folks who are also right-sizing their businesses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything in this about performance? So they're gonna not have all their eggs in one basket per terminal. That makes sense. And are there other factors like performance-based? Are they going to pick on the guys who are struggling, or those that are really big, or those that are having safety issues? Or is there any kind of other things behind it?
It's a little bit of all of that. One of the things, when it gets to be roughly 5 months before your contract is due to be renewed, you're going to be measured or judged on what FedEx is calling some KPIs, and they're service-related and safety-related KPIs. If you achieve the KPIs they want you to have or better, then you can get the exclusive right to renegotiate your current CSA. However, just because you get the exclusive right to renegotiate your CSA doesn't mean that FedEx is going to offer you your entire CSA. So let's say you have 4,500 stops or whatever it is. You might get the exclusive right to renegotiate or to negotiate a new contract for your CSA, but it's likely that they're going to modify that CSA to get you down under 25 stops anyway. Now, that's a terminal by terminal, or it's a case by case basis. More than likely over the next several years, pretty much everybody in any given terminal is not going to have more than 2,500 stops, or not going to have more than 6 to 10% of a terminal's service area.
And that's what you're seeing. So just in case, I imagine most of our listeners know exactly what you're talking about when you say KPIs and CSAs. KPIs are key performance indicators. Tell people, just in case they didn't know, just a quick definition of what a CSA is in the FedEx Ground world.
A CSA is a contracted service area, or it's the area of a terminal service area that your operation services.
Thank you. That'll help for our listeners out there who may have found us and they're not currently FedEx Ground Contractors and may be wondering what a CSA is. So you mentioned, Jeff, that 5 months prior to their contract negotiations, right? How will these contractors be notified? Will they get an email? Will they get a phone call? How are people that you're talking to, how are they finding out?
Well, either the local terminal management will say something to you, set up a meeting, or you'll get a notice through your My Ground Biz message center that it's time to review your KPIs and review your performance and see where they want to go in the future.
Tracy, have you received any messages have you been contacted by terminal management?
The only thing that I've gone through myself is the rapid ratings review, where they do the financial health assessment of your business. So I think that's one of the things that's included in the end of agreement language that they've updated. And I think that's probably the first key step would be, and this is just my own personal opinion, that's the first step. They're going to look to see if your business is financially healthy. If you're not, that's just one more one more egg in their basket to make it so that you're going to be able to get their packages delivered, because ultimately that's what they're concerned about is the box gets from A to B.
The rapid rating review, that'll be a topic of a whole nother podcast, but that is one of the KPIs, and that will be a bigger deal. It's already starting to happen. We're already starting to get some feedback. So, Jeff, back to you. So if someone out there does get a notice that their contract is coming up, are there some things, and they're interested in spinning off part of their business, they're bumping up against that 2,500 stops, or they're over that and they don't know really where to start? Can you tell listeners maybe this is the first step, or here's steps 1, 2, 3 of what you should do to start being prepared?
First of all, you know how many stops you're doing. So if you're already over 2,500 in a given facility, you ought to start thinking about what you'd want to spin off before it even gets to the 5 months out from your contract renewal. You'd want to be able to go yourself with a plan to FedEx and say, all right, FedEx, here's the deal. I'm at 5,000 stops. I want to take 2,500 of them, or I want to split that up into 2 or something. And I think these 2 areas would be good, splitting up these other 2,500 stops that I have. I think I want to put 1,200 of them here and 1,300 of them over here. I think those would make very good work areas. What do you think? You don't want to necessarily get into the situation where they're having to intervene and they're going to make decisions for you, because if they do that, they're going to do them in light of what they think is best for the terminal, which may not necessarily be good for you. So if you're already over 2,500 stops, or you're already over 10%, or whatever your situation is, we think the first thing you should do is maybe get an engineering analysis from our folks. We do that. We can try to help you out and say, look, you got 5,000 stops. Maybe these 2,000 ought to go over here in another area. It makes a lot of engineering sense. Just because, you say, well, these stops are on the other side of the river or something like that. Well, that's cool, but how would a industrial engineer, or how would a engineer that handles this type of business, how would they look at it? So that you can present something that makes sense from an engineering standpoint. And then once you do something like that, we could come up with what we call a spin-off report, so that we could analyze the resulting area and come up with all the different things that would make hopefully some sense, and you would be able to present that to a possible buyer of a piece of your business. Things like how many miles are in an area, what's the stem miles, what's the packages per stops per hour that could be attained in an area, how many drivers would it take, how many trucks would it take, you name it. There's a whole boatload of things that you'd have to simulate or do the work to try to figure out what that new area or new areas look like, and then that way you could present that to somebody that may want to buy it, who knows who, but that you'd want something on paper. You don't want to just say, well, I think this would be a good area over here, and I think that would be a good area over there. You want to also make sure that these areas are split up into solid zip codes. We see people saying, well, I want these 2 areas over here and these 4 work areas. Well, you can do that, but it's not as nice and tidy and simple as it is just spinning off whole zip codes. Our friends at FedEx will appreciate that, and people that may be looking to buy these areas will appreciate that, because it's much easier to define, and it's much easier to say, here's what happens in this zip code, and that zip code. It also aligns with FedEx's future plans if you just have contiguous, full zip codes. So, once again, if you're in this situation where you're thinking you need to spin something off, or you're going to be in that situation, you'd want to get ahead of the curve and go ahead and try to be proactive. It'll go a lot simpler, better for you than it will if you get in a situation where they're telling you, oh, now you got to go ahead and spin some stuff off, or else we're going to take it from you. You don't want to get there. Don't go there. Be proactive about it and get some things on paper now rather than later.
That is solid advice. So you start, because you're going to be selling this to somebody, and most accountants just want to see, some kind of returns, and it won't be easily done when you're trying to spin off a portion of your business. You're going to have something more than that in writing. So it's not like you're selling your whole business like people have traditionally done, because it's just going to be a portion of it. So it does make it more complicated. So that's solid advice. Get an engineering report and then a spin-off report, because you're gonna need it. You're going to need something to do this, because it's not like the traditional way of selling your whole business and getting out of it completely. So
right.
That's
very
good advice.
It's right. It's very difficult to do that, and some people think they can, but we have a system and a process to do this. So we would suggest you let us help you with that.
Tracy, getting back to you one last time, and then we'll start wrapping this up. When you spin off part of your territories, what if you were talking to someone who was unfamiliar with this, and you're already anticipating, as you said, you're already in the process of it, what are you expecting to do after you spin off part of your operations, part of your CSAs?
After we close on our deal, we're going to continue. We're going to reinvest that money back into the business, and we're going to continue to grow, most likely in our line haul side of the business. We've already been growing quite a bit, but we're trying to continue to increase our footprint in our specific geographical location and try to get some more assigned runs that direction. But the real thing that we're trying to do is drop a lot of debt for the company, so that it makes us easier to be nimble, because as 2020 showed us, you never know what could be lurking right around the corner, and you got to be prepared and have the ability to react in front of the problem instead of after. Be proactive instead of reacting, trying to catch everything from the back foot, and instead lead the charge, and having that financial ability to quickly have access to capital and not have to rely on loans from a bank or any other funding sources, I think is the direction that we are trying to go.
Well, that's more solid advice. I think that's why people like listen to these podcasts, and why we've had success with people tuning into these. We just started last year, but it's always good advice, and it's very honest and very insightful. Thank you for that, Tracy. I appreciate you spending time with us today. I know you're busy. Thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and hopefully it helped somebody.
I'm sure it will. Jeff, any parting words about what others, if they aren't in Tracy's position and they don't really have a plan for what to do afterwards, like after they spin off part of it? They may have debt, like Tracy said. But is there anything that you would suggest to people that they look at post rightsizing?
That's actually a good idea to take some of it. It actually is it's a pretty good, solid business practice to take some of your gains. If you've made equity gains, might as well take some of them off the table. I think capital gains taxes are going to be going the wrong way here pretty soon. So if that's the case, you may want to take that, whatever you can, the proceeds from a spinoff, and invest it back in the business is not a bad idea at all. Just makes sense. And then keep in mind, just because you spin off an area, let's say you got 5,000 stops, you spin 2,500 of them off, now you're left with 2,500. It doesn't mean that 2,500 is going to be stagnant. If the growth projections come true, which normally they do, you're going to be looking at 2, 3, 4 years from now doing it again, because you're going to have going to wind up with more than 2,500 stops again. So you want to focus. Then you can focus on a smaller area, but grow that much denser, smaller area faster than you could, with a much broader area with a lot of miles. It's a good business practice to keep going there.
Well, that's insightful too. You're right. The predictions have been about growth, and they've come true so far, and they're predicting more growth. So no reason to think that it won't happen. And like Tracy mentioned, you never know what's going to happen. The future will surprise us, like 2020 surprised all of us. Thank you to you, Jeff, for your time as well. I know you're busy with lots of different projects going on at eTruck, so I will let both you guys get back to work. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it, and I hope you'll join me again on a future episode.
All right. Thanks.